What's up everyone, it's Caddy with Money Vesting. In this video we are going to be talking about Square, ticker symbol SQ, or also known as Block. They reported their first quarter fiscal year 23 earnings yesterday after the markets closed. I'm going to break down everything you need to know about this company. We'll talk about the revenues, the earnings, the gross payment volume, and PayPal is reporting next week, so it's going to give us a little bit more insight into what to expect from PayPal as well. And of course, we're going to do the intrinsic value calculation, talk a little bit about whether Square is a buy at these prices or whether we're better off just kind of waiting for a better price to come. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, find it helpful. If you do, make sure that you drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're just joining us for the first time, link to our Discord and Patreon is going to be down below if you're interested in joining us and our money investing community. We've got a little bit over 3,700 members from all over the world talking about fundamental and technical analysis, macroeconomics, and stocks and options as well. So link's going to be down below if you're interested in joining us. The first week of the month is usually the best time to join. So this right here were the numbers. So Q1 2023 highlights, and the gross profits increasing by 32% year over year to $1.71 billion. And the Cash App gross profit, which is a very, very significant growth driver for the company, up 49% year over year to almost $1 billion. That's actually pretty strong numbers there. And there were about 20 million monthly Cash App card actives, up 34% year over year for Square. And Square gross profit in itself was up 16%. So this is a much slower growing business at 770 million. And the company is still generating an operating loss and a net loss of about $17 million. But the adjusted EBITDA did grow about 90% to almost $400 million. This right here is the Square's gross payment volume, which was at over $46.2 billion. That's up 38% year over year. And this is basically a composition of how it's made up. So $500,000 plus seller size, annualized gross payment volume at 17.5 billion, then sellers between 125 and 500,000, 13.7 billion, and then less than 125,000 was just over $15.2 billion in the first quarter. So 38% growth for Square is pretty strong, and I'm expecting very strong numbers out of PayPal next week as well, because Cash App and Venmo can be, very much similar in the same sort of segment, and Venmo has also been a very strong growth driver for PayPal. So I'm expecting very strong GPV growth rates for the company, because we also learned from Shopify and Amazon and even Visa, and some of these companies have reported some strong e-commerce spending in the first quarter 23. Now, when it comes to the gross profit, so again, 1.71 billion, that's up 32%, and total net revenue was almost $5 billion in the first quarter of 2023, up 26%. Now, excluding for Bitcoin revenue, now here's where things get really interesting for Square specifically, is that their Bitcoin revenue is their main source of revenue. It's actually quite crazy, because it is a really, and when I say really, like a really low margin business. They're only making like 1 to 2% on Bitcoin revenue, as opposed to their subscription services. Even their hardware business got a higher margin than Bitcoin. So it's really crazy that over 50% of their revenue comes from Bitcoin, and yet most of the profits come from their other business segments. That's why, excluding Bitcoin revenue in the first quarter was 2.83 billion, up 27% year over year. So you can see that $5 billion in a total revenue, and 2.83 billion, a little over half was the revenue from other segments. So almost 50% comes from Bitcoin. This right here is going to be the Cash App ecosystem. So in the first quarter, Cash App generated over $3.27 billion of revenue and $931 million of gross profit. And that's up 33% and 49% year over year respectively. And excluding Bitcoin revenue, Cash App revenue was up 52% year over year to over $1.11 billion. So if you include for Bitcoin revenue, it's a little bit lower, because Bitcoin trading has been decelerating because of the prices that have been coming down. And we drove growth in net new transacting activities and strong engagement across products in Cash App ecosystem. Inflows per transacting active were up to over $1,100, up 8% year over year. That's also a pretty strong number there. So this right here is the balance sheet. So one thing that I want to point out, which is quite concerning, is the fact that they've got a lot of goodwill sitting on the balance sheet at almost $12 billion. So the balance sheet's total assets, 31 billion, and of 31 billion, 12 billion in goodwill. That's about a third of the balance sheet is in goodwill. I like to look at a balance sheet which is like less than 5%, or close to, the most I can stretch this out to is 10%. in terms of goodwill, because goodwill fluctuates a lot, right? It's an intangible asset, so you can value it however you want, and it's got different, it's really volatile in nature, right? So the balance sheet can really fluctuate depending on the value of that goodwill. So 12 billion is a lot for Square. It makes up over a third of the overall asset base. This right here, cash and investments in short-term debt securities. I'm surprised they don't have any other marketable securities. They're investing in fixed income, which is, again, that's it's their choice on what to do with the cash. But $1 billion and $5 billion is what they are looking at. Again, I think it's going to be U.S. Treasuries, which are fixed income debt securities. So over $6 billion of cash and short-term investments. And then when you come over to the long-term debt, which is going to be a senior note 13 over here, it's going to be sitting at just over 4.1 billion. So more cash than long-term debt on the balance sheet. And we've also got more current assets of almost 16 billion versus current liabilities of 8.7. So we got a 2 to 1 ratio for the current ratio. And then total assets also do exceed total liabilities, but make sure that you account for that $12 billion goodwill. If you exclude that, then we're sitting on total assets at roughly, I would say, when I do my mental math here, close to 20 billion versus total liability sitting at $13.8 billion. So still a pretty good balance sheet overall. So this right here is the actual income statement. And what do we got? We got subscription-based revenue at 1.3 billion, very strong growth there. So super excited to see that. Transaction-based revenue also growing to 1.4 billion. We had hardware revenue to 337 million, that's flat year over year. And Bitcoin revenue was also higher on a year-over-year basis. But again, if you come down to Bitcoin cost, almost all of it is literally just cost. $2.1 billion in cost with $2.1 billion in revenue. So they are literally making $0 in Bitcoin. It's just a way to get people to their ecosystem. And transaction-based, and the best business for them is subscription services, and $264 million is their cost. So very, very high margins. And that's one of the reasons why Square's margins in the future can continue to grow. If they can grow their subscription-based services-based revenue, right? If that can actually become a bigger piece of the overall puzzle, because if you do the math, 959 divided by 3960, we're looking at 24%. 24% was the contribution margin from subscription last year, versus this year, 1366 divided by 4990, 27%. That's a 3 percentage point increase in subscription and service-based revenue. What does that mean? That means better margins in the future, right? That is what that means. Simply, in simple terms, that means better margins over the long term. If Square can find a way to get this number to 30, 35, 40, 45, 50% in the future, it's game over. It's going to really report some very good margins, and it's going to be able to have that operating leverage report some better net income and profitability as well on the bottom line. Right now, we still have a net loss of about almost 20 million. And it's a negative 3 cents per share in EPS. So if you come over to some of the actual assumptions that analysts are making, they're expecting Square to report $1.78 per share in EPS. It's a 78% growth year over year. And then grow that number out to $8 and then all the way up to $17 by the year 2032. If I plug in these numbers, these are the compounded annual growth assumptions that Square is going to be reporting, about a 35% growth in the next 5 years. And then over the next 9 years, almost a 29% growth for the company. Now, I'll let you decide if that is high or low. For me, that's a little bit more on the optimistic side. I'm going to go with slightly lower numbers. So let's just start with 25% in growth for net income over the next 5 years. We're going to come back to the P ratio, 12% discount rate, 10% margin of safety, and 5% share dilution, because the company's been pretty brutal in issuing a lot of shares. It's actually been issuing a lot of shares in the past. Now, P multiple, let's just start with 25 to keep that consistent, right? Price to earnings with a PEG ratio also at 25. It's going to keep our PEG ratio at 1, and this is going to be 2023. We come down to a fair value of $53.95. Right now, it's trading at $60.70, right? More or less $60. That means it's actually not that far off from those assumptions from that fair value. Now, you have to understand that I'm definitely going with a little bit of an optimistic assumption, 25% net income growth, 25 times P multiple. It's a little bit lower than what the analysts are estimating, and Square could actually end up beating these expectations if the services revenue continues to grow. And services, we know the margins are dramatically higher, and as a result, the bottom line could grow at a much faster rate than the overall revenue because of the higher margins and the operating leverage. So I might be going off of a bit more conservative, but for me personally, I'm a little bit more optimistic here, but that's just how I am in terms of risk aversion. But 25.25 gives us a good fair value at close to $53, $54 for Square with about a $600 million share count, which of course is going to grow at 5%. So we're pricing in a 10% margin of safety, a 12% discount rate, a 5% share dilution, and 25% growth gives us about a $54 fair value on Square. So it's not really that far off from where it's trading at the moment. So this right here is the support level that I would be paying attention to for Square as a very nice area of support, and another 51.55 is going to be that level to also pay attention to. We have gotten up to as much as $85 to $86 per share, then got rejected, and since that level we have obviously been selling off or down 36-37%. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I could see myself maybe taking a starter position, small skin in the game in the 50s, low 50s. Once it becomes a little bit more undervalued. Below that fair value is when it becomes undervalued, and that's when I would be a lot more interested in taking advantage of maybe starting a small position in Square, and of course investing for the long term, considering that operating leverage starts to kick in. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. From a more tradable, from a more technical standpoint, support level is going to stay put at $58. That's exactly where we are, and you can see that we have bounced off of that level in the past, but right now we're still inside this downtrending channel. So again, hope you guys enjoyed this video, find it helpful. If you do, make sure that you drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're just joining us for the first time, the link to our Discord and Patreon is going to be down below if you're interested in joining us, and of course access to all the private live streams, the private videos, the Binance alerts, all that stuff is going to be included. It's always happy investing. I'll see you all in the next video.